Hello to everybody out there in the world of social media. We are here one more time. I am Jo Self with Practical Strengths, and we are presenting our different facilitators and speakers for the Future of Strengths Forum. This is our second annual forum. We had a great turnout last year, and we're hoping to double that this year if we can. And I'm super excited because I've got a lot of new people who have a lot of wisdom to share. Among those people is the lovely Jeff, who you can see here with me. And I'm just going to let you take it away, Jeff. Let the people know a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you do in the world.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be part of something of this magnitude. And I really, I've been showing up in the world with strengths for a little over 25 years. And started for me not liking my results when I first got them. And then
You
I
are one of
became,
those. I love those
I'm one of
conversations.
those, right? And I had been in hindsight as I finally got all 34 and dug into it. I learned that, I had been fixing my 33 and 34 strength my entire life as if that was what was wrong with me. And I had found that that was where I was most miserable, was trying to show up in those as my primary. And, I just fell deeper and deeper in love with the process of what strengths are. And today that's developed into a process where I've learned to lean into things that people think are a problem in most environments where I walk into, and really focus on proficiency, really focus on what's working, what is going well, what people love about themselves, about their environments. And then lean into the nuance of individual genius and how that works on a team. I find that everybody's unique in three specific ways. Otherwise, we're very much connected in the same. Other than some of the standard things that you find that are differences that cultural norms lean into, which is heritage and background and color, race, nationality, all of that. It's on an individual personal level. We're unique in our approach, we're unique in our perspective, and we're unique in the choices and decisions we make with that. So really looking at that and understanding the value of those unique and individual approaches is how you pull teams together towards a common goal and find just amazing catapulting type growth. So I've I've developed a designing process and help people lean into the nuance of their genius, consider that on a team, and help companies and teams of companies get what they thought was unachievable results somehow. Uh, so that's what I do, and where I find myself today.
I love that. I can see where we have a lot of alignment then. And I absolutely love the simplicity of your, the three sort of pillars there of your approach, perspective, and the decisions you make based on those two things. I often lean into, the values, motivations, and contributions of people, right? So having a simplified way of looking at it, I think, is great. And my mantra for teams is always, there is no I in team, but there is a me. And if you don't know the me's, you can't build a we.
Right.
Right. So definitely feeling some alignment there. And so I love what you're doing out there in the world. And you're going to bring something a little different for us, I think. I'm really excited about the conversation. You're joining us as one of our 5 keynote speakers. And so what is the topic that you can share? What's a little glimpse of what you might be sharing at the forum with our folks?
Well, Joe, this is a vulnerable topic for me of what we're leaning into. Pardon me. It's, for the first time, I'm bringing forward something that's been an avocation of mine for a long time. It's probably been the center of me really learning about change and how to effectively support people through change, and challenging the idea that it's difficult or hard, and it has to do with trauma and facing trauma in life. So, that's really what I'm going to branch out and talk about.
I love that because I think, something that came up which led into last year's forum. One of the ways I come up with the topics, the big broad piece of doing the forum is really exploring outside the traditional workspace, which by doing that does not mean the things we're exploring don't impact the workspace, right? You talked about the fact that identifying trauma and identifying these vulnerabilities is something that's going to be really important when we think of the workplace as a more holistic space, right? So, but what we're trying to do is support spaces that I know there's a lot of interest, but not necessarily a lot of support. One of the things we do with this forum is to bring people together in a way to help them find their tribe. So when they feel like maybe they're floundering out there trying to do something they don't know other people are doing, we can actually create community for them so they have a support system to explore those spaces that are maybe the non-traditional spaces for strengths. So I love that you're bringing a trauma-informed, perspective into what strengths can do. I saw a lot last year of how we use strengths as a mask, how we can lean into our strengths for psychological safety, which doesn't always show up in the best way for everyone else around us, even when it gives us comfort, right? How it helps us be resilient and get through trauma. We did have someone talk about grief last year and do a session on grief, which I think was really powerful. It actually bled over into the lobby when the session was over last year. So there's definitely some interest in this space. So I'm really excited to hear what you're going to bring to the table with your talk. I think people are going to really enjoy that. If that's the right word. Talk about trauma and then say enjoy. That sounds like a weird combination of words. I think they'll find it interesting and informational, and hopefully that vulnerable space makes a big connection for a lot of people.
I think it's interesting you use the word joy because I think it is joy and it can be joy. And we don't always connect trauma to joy, which is understandable. But as someone that's been through trauma, at one point I had a great deal of joy on some level, right? It maybe didn't always show up that way or feel that way, but in hindsight, there was a great deal of joy in the attachments I had to my story and the fact that I had overcome something. And
Yeah, there's something liberating
there
in the
is, and
process, right? That even when there's grief, there can still be something that's liberating in that process.
absolutely. And there's also a limitation in being attached to the story and having that be a
Yeah.
part of our identity. So, part of what we'll talk about is the idea that we are not our strategies and then adapted versus our authentic self. And, you know, there's a scoring out there called the ACEs that is standardized. You can look it up. It's a governed. I don't know if it's Health and Human Services or who actually is behind it, but it's 10 questions anyone can ask about one of these 10 things happen in before you were the age of 18. And depending on how you answer it, it's a 0 through 10 score. And many people are thoroughly surprised that there are zeros in the world. And but what we've learned in a broad scope is that that helps support the idea that the story is not as significant because if we've attached our stories or our strategies to our identity, it's ultimately limiting. So it doesn't mean and there's a way to not into there's a way to validate ourselves and move forward with the story that beats the norm that I was thinking that I'd be invalidated if the story weren't there. So, but it's if we're a half of one because we have secondary trauma and that we're very close to someone in the world that suffered trauma, therefore we're getting the effects of it,
Mm-hmm.
or if we're actually have had some form of trauma, whether we're a 1 or a 10. I'm a 7. What we learn is that everyone with the scale has the same feelings, and even many people that are zeros have empathetic feelings. They have relatable feelings of just feeling devastated by traumas that have happened in the world, and then understanding how you can separate the difference between an adult's trauma that is post-traumatic stress that we look at that happens as an adult and the developmental trauma that happens and the different solutions and ways of pathing through that. So as I released stories and as I started to validate, because sometimes the story was also invalidating a part of me. So as we really move through this, what does happen is joy. So the idea that someone's been through a significant amount of trauma could actually have a greater experience with joy on some level than someone that hasn't is almost considerable. And a case in point that we probably won't talk about during the show is I've met people in churches and organizations where I'm there trying to learn and better myself and learn something that expansive for me. I'll sit there and I've had people as I share my story say to me, I wish I had the same connection that I see. And I get it gets emotional to talk about because it's they see that the struggle or the problem or whatever it is that I went through gave me an extremely visceral connection also to this other outside of self
Yeah.
type of experience. So, and they're sitting there having had this beautiful life saying, wow, I wish I had that connection. And so breathing into that and thinking, okay, so how do we share it in a way where it's not exclusive? How do we include and have everyone still be able to have that connection regardless of our experiences is part of what we can also discuss. But it's
Yeah. That's really interesting because it reminds me of the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger
yep,
and PTSD. It's specifically really about veterans and their sense of belonging and how do they come back to community. But I love it as just a book about community in general. But it talks a lot about how people do bond in some of the most difficult moments of our lives. And so many times that's why veterans will often keep going back to war or going back to conflict because of the brotherhood they feel, right? That when they come back home from it, they don't have that same sense of belonging that they do that's surrounded by purpose. And it's, how do you bring people to purpose? I guess my big question for myself is how do you bring people to purpose without conflict, without trauma? How do you start to define that purpose in a way that is productive and creates the village,
right.
sentiment again, right? That's a
Yeah.
lot of what's behind what I'm doing with practical strengths in general. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jeff. I
Oh
really
yeah.
appreciate it.
I think on that note too, some of that is how we use language, right? Some of it's just how we speak about it. We veterans come back. I'm a veteran, and I'm when people say thank you, I'm clear today that I'm standing there receiving thanks for a huge number of people that have nothing to that I'm just the conduit. So of course I graciously accept the thanks and because I know what the thanks is about and that it's a channel. But at the same time, we're looking at people that have been through significant trauma instead of honoring the expertise of what they were able to survive. And this isn't just veterans. It's we say, okay, now you're broken or now you have a problem and we need to fix that instead of saying, wow, now we need your help. Now we need you to be of service to learn about how you survived and what that expertise is so that you can be of greater use to the world around you. Because there's a ton of crisis management needs in the world and that can change the conversation. And a mistake we
Mm,
make as veterans is, again, how we connect ourselves to the stories can be very limiting. So we walk forward believing that we'll never have a better brotherhood, that we'll never have a better connection, and we're basically sealing ourselves off from the rest of
mm,
the world in that we've now told ourselves that we're not going to build any better connections than what we had. So now I'm stuck where I am. And it's a positive thing to say, so we don't want to discount it. I don't want to
right.
discount the relationships I had, but at the same time, it's like, how do you know that you're not going to, if you really apply yourself forward in life as a veteran, as a non-military person now moving forward, if you truly push yourself and apply yourself forward, how do you know you're not going to develop even deeper, better connections?
Yeah.
So
Mm.
the
Oh,
way
that's
we
powerful.
rid
I can't
ourselves.
wait for your talk. I think it's going to be really great. We probably go on all day about this. So I'm very
I hope so.
excited for that. So we're going to move on
Right.
to our third question, which is our, surprise factor of the conversation. I have 5 different questions that are all big picture type questions around the future of strengths, not the form itself, but the concept of what it is. So pick a number between 1 and 5 for me.
3.
In a world where strengths is a shared language, what becomes possible?
Oh, man. We're talking about we're talking about really basic wisdom and instruction that comes through many different venues of expertise, whether we go scriptural through different religions and look at what scriptures say, or if we go towards different self-help and all the, people through the centuries that have, pioneered psychology or anything else, there's a common bond that says, a common thread in all of it that says, focus on what is right, focus on what's working, right? So if we're in a strengths-based, it's so upside down, right, from everything culturally that I've been taught, to really think about that and have that as the common language. Because if we're looking at what is working, what is strong, what is pure, what is true, all these things, and which would include in relationships. If we're focusing on the points we can agree on and letting go of the things we can't, if we're finding the most shared value we have, that we can grow from, then we're we're literally able to. I think the expanse is something we can't measure yet or fathom, because the critical mind is busy finding problems and ways to get in our way, or ways to problems to look for to fix consistently. We don't have in our modern day the same issues. And the entire idea that survival of the fittest that many of us still live with in our minds isn't even a reality anymore. We have people that aren't certainly physically strong, and that survival of the fittest is still a concept, and it's still stronger and weaker physically can make a difference in many scenarios, but it's just not the same anymore. There's such an amazing strengths in people that don't have the abilities, the physical abilities. So that's a little off track maybe, but I think that what happens is we begin to understand the power of the mind and all the things we haven't yet considered because of our limitations, and how we're constantly looking for critical problems. And we're not running away from tigers anymore in most circles, right?
For the most part, no.
We're, and what those tigers even look like metaphorically have changed, right? And
Right.
but we're the only mammal that has the frontal lobe that can think ourselves out of our instincts. Right. So as we begin to expand and open our minds and get out of these operating systems that, that are no longer really valid, right? Change is hard, all these things, right? It's like change is happening so fast and so easy around us that anyone saying that it's difficult is missing something, right? So not that it doesn't still feel that way.
Right, right, right.
So I think that we're unable to measure the potential of what literally can happen and does happen in a world where our common language is strengths.
Yes, which is my big goal, right? 34 words that could change the world when I look at this. It's one of the reasons, thank you for that answer. It's one of the reasons after the forum, we actually invite everyone to participate for free in a foresight led workshop. So we use futures thinking. And I believe this year we're going to look at using the STEEP model through natural foresight, which is where I'm certified, which is social, technological, educational, environmental, and political, and basically break people into groups to think about how could strengths impact positively these spaces, and potentially what are the drawbacks of strengths in those spaces, or how do those spaces impact the ability for us to actually infuse strengths. So we're going to work through one of those foresight models to get people thinking, with our goal of being inspired to take action once you're on the other side, and hopefully come up with a way that we can start to make strengths more of that language that unites us and celebrates the individual, but shows us why collectively those differences are important to positively sustain us forward, right, as we go.
One of the beautiful things about strengths, if you look at CliftonStrengths, and I don't, you may want to edit this out, because CliftonStrengths, I really believe, is only a very small piece of strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's so critical in this day and age and what we're going through, and maybe it will always, in that being the most scientifically studied strengths model and having as many data points, and the common language and all the positives that we look at it is a miss not to at least utilize the information and
Yeah.
access it and use it. At the same time, churches for years and other organizations for years, civic organizations have been helping people harvest and realm what their strengths are from many different angles, right? It's you look at Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. We put together a number of years ago for different groups a way of evaluating how well we're participating in creating the
Yeah,
environment where people can self-actualize, right?
right.
So it's all of these things make up strengths in a way as far as what every person's great at or team
Yes.
or group. And so it's a great conversation. I can't wait to be a
Well,
part of
well,
it.
my goal is to really have those 34 words that everybody can understand at like some fifth grade vocabulary level, right? So that we have a neutral, like Switzerland level language that allows us to have better conversations because we can come to things a little bit more objectively because we have this shared language. Because even with values, how you define honesty and how I define honesty could be very different and can create conflict, even though we share honesty as a value,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah, I use that a lot with integrity as an example because most people think of integrity. It's one of the most commonly used values in company structures, and most people think of it as honesty, as doing the right thing. And very rarely do you hear people really understanding that there's an ethical role to it and there's a structural role to it. So, am I honest and is it strengthening the relationship? Is it strengthening
yeah,
the
exactly.
purpose? So
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time to let our audience know more about you and what they can expect from you. I hope everyone takes a moment to listen, that you've enjoyed these few moments with Jeff, and that you'll take time to register and join us at the forum. It is just $197, which gets you full access, plus the post forum workshop with foresight. We currently still have a couple of networking opportunities beforehand as well as a speakeasy lab training, which is really a communications with strengths workshop training that you can come and enjoy. And if there's a piece of it you want to adapt for your own, we welcome you to do so. You can also make sure you register at fosforum.online/Jeff. Let's make sure Jeff gets some credit for bringing you here to this forum. We certainly appreciate it. And that link will also be included when we post this online. So thank you so much. Check the comments for those links to learn more, and we will see you starting October 2nd.